So welcome, everybody, to our panel session, Sustainable Aviation Fuels for Clean Skies. It's a co-creation of the PtX Hub Berlin and the World Economic Forum. I'm Torsten Schwab, head of the PtX Hub in Berlin, and I will be your host today for this session. To the audience, please at any time post your questions and comments in the chat. You can access the chat by clicking on the yellow button that should appear on your screen. But now let's see who's with us for this panel. With our panelists, 5 of them, now we can introduce them.
Hello. So first up, we have Volker Ratzmann, who is the Executive Vice President of Corporate Public Affairs at Deutsche Post DHL Group, the world's largest courier company. Having laid out a clear green roadmap, DHL are willing to invest in and obtain sustainable aviation fuels, providing they have adequate support from policymakers and suppliers. Next up, we have Sami Jauhiainen, the Vice President for Business Development in the Renewable Aviation Business Unit at Neste, a producer of renewable fuels. Neste is committed to PTL and just invested in Sunfire, the leading technology developer of high-temperature electrolysis and power-to-X solutions. Next, we have Yekaterina Burning, a senior policy manager at Transport and Environment, Europe's leading clean transport NGO. Her aim is to ensure that the use of hydrogen and PtX in the transport sector is efficient and is sustainably guaranteed. Next, we have Lauren Uppink-Calderwood, the head of aviation, travel and tourism at the World Economic Forum, an international organization for public-private cooperation. Lauren drives action on sustainability and climate change, pandemic recovery, and technology in the sector. With the launch of their Clean Sky for Tomorrow initiative, the World Economic Forum is strongly committed to the transformation of the aviation sector. And finally, we have Dr. Mike Enskat, the head of section for energy, water, and mobility in the Department for Sectoral and Global Programs at GIZ. GIZ promotes sustainable transport and energy worldwide to harness societal benefits, such as access to jobs, clean air, and economic development, to improve quality of life and fight the climate crisis.
So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's great to have you 5. And I would like to start with an intro question to all of you. And this is about what motivates you to look into PtX and PTL for aviation in particular. So Volker, I understand that DHL will have a demand, and a growing one. So what is it about PTL that catches your attention?
Yes, well, we've set ourselves to the target of being net zero by 2050, and as the biggest logistic company in the world, we run more than 230 aircrafts, and 66% of our carbon footprint comes out of the aviation sector. So if we really want to achieve our targets and we want to reduce our footprint by 17 million tons as of 2030, so we have to reduce, especially in that field, our carbon footprint, and therefore we need synthetic aviation fuels, sustainable aviation fuels. And we know very clearly that PTL is the highest standard of sustainable aviation fuel we can get, and therefore we really want to help to ramp up the volumes and to get a pricing that we can afford this fuel for our aviation.
Great, thank you, Volker. So there is an off-taker. Very good, very good. And if you look at the providing side, Sami, at Neste, you have been producing HEFA bio-based fuels and now looking into power to liquid fuels also. What is it that motivates you to that step?
Yes, so Neste has been producing, supplying sustainable aviation fuels to airlines in Europe, North America, and also in Asia for 2 years now, since 2019. We can produce today around 100,000 tons of sustainable aviation fuels in our Porvoo refinery in Finland, but we look to grow that to 1.5 million tons by 2023 through our ongoing investments in Rotterdam and also in Singapore. So relative to that background, our motivation to work with power to liquids is to ensure that we can continuously bring to the market solutions to further grow the potential of sustainable aviation fuels in substituting conventional jet fuels in aviation. And power to liquids will have a growing and a critical role there, especially from 2030 onwards.
That's a nice picture of the future, 2030 onwards. We can get into that later on a little deeper. Ekaterina, from the point of view of an NGO dedicated to sustainability, what's in for that with PtX and PTL for aviation?
Thanks a lot for this question. Well, there are several reasons. First of all, international aviation makes up 2.8% of the global CO2 emissions. This is much higher than some of the countries. If we also account for non-CO2 effects, then the impact of the international aviation on the global warming is 5.5%. So this is a huge problem, and we will need to decarbonize the sector in order to achieve climate neutrality and in order to achieve Paris climate objectives worldwide. But then, as transport and environment, we also understand that aviation is a very important part of life for many people. Me, myself, I'm born in Latvia. I studied in the UK. I moved to Germany for work. Well, aviation was always a part of my life. And that's why we do not pursue the policy of bans, for example. We do think that we need to find technical solutions for decarbonizing aviation instead of banning aviation as such. And so the sustainable fuels offer us this solution, and maybe we can also touch on this later. Sustainable aviation, sustainable fuels can also help us in reducing not only the CO2 emissions, but also the non-CO2 effects of the aviation. So that's my motivation for this work in a nutshell.
Great, another point of view. And how about world economy, Lauren? If we look at the world, at its economy, PTL, PtX, is there something it can offer? Is there a role for it in the future?
Yeah, I wouldn't repeat what our colleagues have said about its importance. Aviation is crucial to individual economies and the global economy, and we need to make sure that we can protect the benefits it provides to many nation states. But we can't do that in a world that's not aligned with net zero. And so we, as the World Economic Forum, are using our platform of cross-sectoral and public-private collaboration to address the chicken and egg situation that exists with sustainable aviation fuels. So because of the prohibitive cost premium, we are looking at a number of different mechanisms that can address that chicken and egg, where the willingness to invest or pay the price premium is not yet at scale. And so this is important to us because we believe that with our platform, we can start to address some of those throughout the value chain, from corporate demand to investors, etc. And so that's why sustainable aviation fuels is important to us.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. When we look at developing countries and emerging economies and PTL in that respect, Mike, what motivates GIZ in looking into the PTL?
Yeah, thank you very much, Torsten. Pleasure to be here with you. As a developmental agency of the German federal government, we've really been working over the last 10, 20 years on that twin objective, climate change, global climate change, but also economic development, industrial development of developing countries and emerging economies. And I think the PtX, PtL agenda really is an excellent example of how these two agendas and objectives can meet and really create synergies, because I mean, my colleagues have spoken to the climate opportunities that lie in PtL, but there's also a great opportunity for the long-term industrial development of especially those countries in the south that have a huge renewable energy potential, because we will see a very new commodity market emerging, and there's a great potential for growth, and especially high-quality jobs that can come with that new technology, with that new industry, with that new commodity. And that can provide really great opportunities also for the economic development of our partner countries, besides the climate issue that is obviously a very, very great opportunity here as well.
Great, thank you for that overview. All these different aspects of all these different points of view you have on the PtL. Now, Sami said in 2030 onwards we can provide. Sami, will it be possible to meet the demand to fully defossilize aviation?
I think that potential definitely for sustainable aviation fuels is there, and some great analysis on that respect has, for example, been done by World Economic Forum and McKinsey, and they have estimated that if you would look at all the sustainable raw materials that don't contain land use change related risks, all the waste and residues, already with those you have enough potential to produce about almost up to 500 million tons of sustainable aviation fuels, which is much higher than estimated jet fuel consumption in 2030. And then adding on top of that the potential that power to liquids brings, kind of theoretically almost unlimited potential, then the combination you get out of there definitely gives us confidence that the pathway of substituting liquid conventional fuels exists. It just requires, of course, determination and a need for us to take all these solutions into use as quickly as they are available to be able to do it.
So I understand it will be a mix of all technologies available. Lauren, looking at emerging countries in particular, what would be their role in ramping up PtL for aviation?
Sure. I think Mike touched on it in his initial remarks. Aviation fuel is a global supply chain, and what we want to avoid is producing these fuels and then shipping them to various destinations. So we believe that there is an opportunity to democratize the SAF supply chain and work with countries that are either land rich or have access to renewable energy in surplus, and they can become SAF supply hubs that provide fuel into the pipeline at the nearest airport. That can be enabled through mechanisms like book and claim, but we see that it's important that those countries that may see decarbonization of the aviation industry as a disadvantage to their prosperity and economic development can actually see that there is an industrial opportunity and an opportunity to improve their GDP. We recently released our blueprint for India, for example, which demonstrates that there is you can outweigh the cost of investing in a SAF industry in your community. We demonstrated that there was $2.8 billion in GDP impact that could be created through a SAF industry. And so we believe that there's an opportunity to work with many of those different countries and work on a fuel mix that makes sense for their specific context.
Thank you very much. Volker, as an operator of transport around the globe, what policies would you need to be able to fuel your airplanes in all the countries of the world, in all the places you fly to? Is there a common thing that you can identify that this is important to work on?
Yeah, I think we have to divide a little bit. I think the phases when we are going to ramp up the volumes and just implement a system of ongoing blending percentage in the fuel. This is the first phases, or the starting point. When we once have 100%, then I think we have to discuss it in a different way. But Lauren just mentioned book and claim, and I think this is one of the most important thing we need to just get the stuff into the system. We are working in a network, and I think from a global perspective, the most important thing is to get as much aircrafts flying more sustainable as we can get. So, and therefore, I think this book and claim system is the most important regulation we need to bring the new fuels into the system. We have one big problem. This is the price at the moment, and how to identify those spots where we have the willing companies which are willing to spend more money for this synthetic fuels or this e-fuels, and we have to solve the problem that if we have regulation on blendings and mandatory use of e-fuels, how we can avoid these phenomena of tankering, that companies are coming into those areas and those regions by just having fossil fuels in their tanks that allows them to fly back without getting new fuel into their tanks. But I think those two issues and those two regulations are the most important things and the most important problems we have to solve.
Thank you. Mike, if you hear book and claim, do you think that can be an issue for the cooperation, a topic that can be worked on with the partner countries?
Well, obviously, I think coming to a global or more globalized framework for book and claim system, but also for standardization fuels on the technology side, on the quality side. I think there's a lot of need for international dialogue. You really have to bring institutions together and see how you best adjust national system to the new global requirements. And there's a lot of potential for international cooperation. And we also obviously see a strong role for our organization to work with administrations, technical bodies, and partner countries to support them in this effort. And I mean, I already see over the last year a lot of development and dynamics in our portfolio. I mean, we mainly work for German federal ministries and their international activities, and there's a lot of goodwill and a lot of investment really taking place also from the German government to support these efforts.
That's great to hear. Ekaterina, when we look at the world and the sustainability, and now we were talking about aviation and PTL in aviation, I see that there's a cross-sectoral demand maybe with other sectors. Is that something that sustainability will grow on when we consider that fuels for aviation might be the entry, but then there might be other sectors in transport or other industrial sectors to strive on PtX?
Well, basically, we see aviation and shipping as these sectors where we will need PtX products. Otherwise, in the transport, when we talk about the road transport, we see electrification as the preferred option. Why? Because obviously, with the production of PtX products, we require lots of energy. We conducted a study to analyze the energy demand to switch European shipping and aviation to sustainable fuels. for. But in this study, we looked just at power to liquid, not at advanced biofuels. So if we wanted to switch aviation and shipping to power to liquid, we would need 1,275 terawatt hours of renewable electricity. And so this is already a huge challenge. And that's why we need to focus on these two sectors, so aviation and shipping, focus all our effort on this and try to bring the cost down. Talking about other sectors, of course, industry, heavy industry especially, will be a sector with a huge demand for hydrogen. Here we are talking about the steel and the chemical industry. And I see that there is an option that, for example, by introducing SAF, by introducing power to liquid fuels in the aviation by the means of a quota, by the means of the mandate, we will bring the cost of the plants, of the hydrogen production, of the hydrogen value chains as such, and this will, of course, benefit other sectors. Maybe just one point on book and claim. I do see some difficulties with book and claim when it comes to traceability, certification, and additionality of renewable energy production, because the countries we talk about when we talk internationally, so the potential exporters of power takes such as Morocco, Saudi Arabia, their energy system is still mostly fossil-based. So it won't be a big benefit for climate if, for example, we in Europe claim some amounts of renewable energy production which come from abroad, but from an energy system which is still mostly fossil-based. That's why the temporal geographical correlation of the renewable energy production and hydrogen and power to liquid production is an important criteria, sustainability criteria in my view.
Thank you. So addressing directly the producer, Sami, two questions that come up when I listen to Ekaterina. First is, are there synergies in the production process when you produce aviation fuels, and can you use products that are produced at the same plant for shipping? And the other one is if we think of the additionality and the energy system in the countries where PTL is produced in your plants, how could you guarantee that it's renewable energy and additional renewable energy?
Yes. So I think the first one, if looking at sustainable aviation fuel production, both with HEFA technology or taking e-crude coming out from a Fischer-Tropsch process when producing PTL, and then fractionating that, I think it's the case typically that you will end up having different kind of fractions. Only part of the product yield is fits the aviation specs. So in a sense, from the production, you will by nature cater various sectors within transport, but maybe then also in the polymers and chemical side where the opportunities are, and Neste is already active with our renewable fuels and could of course be active also with the PTL fuels and molecules in the future. I think ensuring the additionality of renewable energy is definitely important. Maybe what are the specific measures for that? I'm not best positioned to comment, but I would highlight that importance. And I think regarding the question on the book and claim, I think I would I agree with Ekaterina's comments that we need to be kind of careful with those kind of methodologies and ensure really that the credibility of sustainable aviation fuels as an emission reduction solution is maintained high, and we don't have suffer from those kind of risks that have eroded the credibility of offset solutions, for example. So I think we need to be a bit cautious with book and claim, and as Neste, what we have been building is really the capability to produce and supply our customers with sustainable aviation fuels globally with a physical molecule without having the need to resorts to book and claim.
Thank you very much for these insights. I would like to move on to our session with the audience, and we have some questions in the chat. So the first one is to Lauren. Currently, most SAF is on a biofuel basis. At which point of time do you see e-kerosene to overtake biofuels as a main source of SAF? At which point of time can e-kerosene be considered commercially ready in your point of view?
I am very flattered that that question came to me, but I believe that the producer might be able to give a better answer there. I think it's going to be a mix of fuels for some time, especially as we ramp up. But I can't give you a date when I think that PtX will overtake biofuels. We obviously have to be careful on as Sami mentioned, around land use changes and sustainability criteria for the biofuels. But because they are at a much greater technology readiness level, we need to work with biofuels in the near term to make sure that we can reach the percentages of sustainable aviation fuel that we wish. But I would maybe pass it over to Sami. Maybe he would have a better forecast of when he sees PTL taking over from biofuels.
Yes, perfect. Sami, would you like to add something?
So if we look at how these technologies ramp up, then HEFA technology is most likely going to remain the largest and most dominant sustainable aviation fuel production technology still in the 2030 horizon. But then on the latter half of that, we should see the scale up of technologies like gasification, Fischer-Tropsch, and alcohol to jet technologies, utilizing a broader range of different waste and residue type of raw materials, and starting to increase their contribution, and power to liquids. We will definitely see the first pilot plants coming on stream ahead of 2030, but I think the commercial scale up probably from then onwards, and I think in the study that I was referring to earlier from McKinsey and a World Economic Forum, it was roughly estimated that somewhere around the time horizon of 2040, 2050, the pricing point of the PTL could be around the same levels where HEFA fuels is. So by that time, we could see the point when power to liquids becomes the largest contributor to sustainable aviation fuel volumes. The thing that I would highlight, of course, that we can't wait to act on aviation's emissions until then. So we need to take all of these solutions into use as soon as they are available, or otherwise we are kind of too late if we compare to the time we have and the carbon budget we have still available as a globe to use.
Okay, so even if we look at horizons in 2030 and 40, we have to act now. Great message, yes. Volker, would you like to add something?
I think I totally agree with Sami. We need the HEFA technologies to produce the stuff we need now, and we need it urgently. This is for clear. But I think we have to be careful that we don't produce lock-in effects, that we just exclude the new technology or just prolongate the implementation of the PTL technology, because I think we have to do the investments to ramp up the plans we need to produce it now, and the more we have and the less incentives we have to go on for that way now and do the investments, the longer it would take to get volumes that could really have an impact on the aviation sector. This at first, and secondly, the book and claim. I see the dangers that's been mentioned by Yekaterina, but I think we have also to take into consideration that we are very limited in producing, especially the amount of renewable energy, and to produce the hydrogen we need to create a volume we really need. And we see very clearly that we will not be able to just produce all the stuff in Europe. We have to build up an international standard, an international monitoring of quality, that we can produce the e-fuels at each point of our networks. Otherwise, we would have to transport it. For sure, we need e-fuels in Singapore and Hong Kong, as well as in Leipzig, as in San Francisco, where our hubs are. But for the first approach, we can just fill it into in South Africa and in other edges of the network. But I think without a book and claim system, we'll really lose the advantage to get a very high and steep increasing of the volumes we can use into the network. And therefore, we really want to discuss about an international book and claim system, which is monitored, which is but gives the possibility to use all the sources we have to get as much stuff into the system as we can get.
Also a great message. Thank you, Volker. There's a question to Ekaterina. Where do you see the greatest bottlenecks? Is it energy? Is it water? Is it rare metals? What is it in your opinion?
Well, I think one bottleneck we have, which I would really call that it is the greatest bottleneck, is the deployment of renewable energy. In countries, several countries in Europe, we have achieved high shares of renewable energy. For example, in Germany, we have 50%, but still the CO2 intensity of the power mix is high. And in order to have a positive climate impact with e-fuels, with Power-to-X products, we will need more renewables and their deployment at a faster pace. So, for example, if we produce e-fuels like e-kerosene with today's power mix of Germany, we are actually emitting 3 to 4 times more CO2 as compared to fossil fuels. So this would be a zero-sum game for the climate. That's why the deployment of renewable energy, but then, of course, technological development and bringing the cost down of electrolyzers, of synthesis plants, also of direct air capture plants. This is definitely a second bottleneck, but I'm very optimistic about the technological development.
Okay, that's good. Optimistic, very good. Yes, I think we saw that there's a lot of hope from all of you, but how can we close the price gap? That's actually a question from the chat to Lauren.
Sure. Linked with a global book and claim system, and I value both the concerns and the optimism about the need for it, is we need to find a way to share that cost across the value chain. We can't expect airlines to carry it themselves. We can't expect producers to carry it. So what we are working on in particular is a SAF certificate accounting framework that would enable, in particular, large corporations that rely on air travel for them to continue their business to cost share. So as we heard earlier, that many of them are willing to pay the full price premium or a portion of it in order to address their Scope 3 emissions. And so working in collaboration with airlines and fuel providers, they can start to share that cost of the price gap and then start to increase demand and hopefully increase supply and bring down the costs. We have seen a number of these types of transactions already taking place. You would have seen folks like PwC, BCG, Microsoft all partnering with their airlines and fuel producers to commit to flying on a portion of sustainable aviation fuel. We're seeing this happening at a increased rate, but we also want to make sure that can be fully traceable and accountable and that it's standardized across the industry. And so this SAF certificate system, this accounting system, aims to do that. We actually will be releasing a report next week that establishes the foundations for that and are working with a number of the folks that I just mentioned, Volker and team, etc., Sami and team, on building this out over the next year. So it needs to be shared across everyone who benefits from aviation, and hopefully this accounting system will enable us to do that.
Thank you. There's actually a question that connects quite well to that. It's addressed to Mike. Is there a specific country or region in which PTL and which decarbonization will be particularly beneficial for the aviation sector as well as for the local economy?
Well, I guess that's obviously something we and a lot of other organizations are currently looking into in more detail, trying to better understand where the quick opportunities, the quick wins, but also from a long-term perspective, where the strategic spots for this new sector and technology. Obviously, the availability of cheap renewable energy resources, be it sun, be it wind, be it maybe water in some case, be it geothermal in some cases, would certainly be a very, very central criterion for selection. The other element I think that is important is to look for countries that have some form of industrial base. I mean, we do have a lot of countries in the south that are still very much relying on let's say agriculture, where the step to really enter into a big industry would be a very difficult one to take. So I think these are among many other criteria, probably two, which I would consider central in identifying the hotspots and the opportunities. Cheap renewable energy resources and some form of an existing industrial base.
Thank you, Mike. That's an interesting insight. Sami, I beg your pardon. I didn't saw your hand. You raised your hand at the last question. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Torsten. I just wanted to kind of contribute further to that pricing question, because that is so central to the question of sustainable aviation fuels and PTL, of course, as well in the future and their scale up. So I think what is really important is that we need the regulatory frameworks like blending obligations that basically just allow passing on the cost to the ticket prices, and fundamentally there is an extra cost, but we shouldn't still exaggerate the impact of that, because if we look at modest mandate levels around 10-15% still in intra-European flights, the per passenger per ticket cost of that is still not more than buying a Coca-Cola and a coffee at the airport, basically. So that is still in the big picture, very much absorbable in the costs. And I think I would also highlight the importance of what Lauren was saying about the potential of voluntary contributions of end customers, companies, private leisure customers, cargo customers, really driving SAF use, either in absence of those blending obligations or enabling more sustainable aviation fuel use on top of those. So there, for example, last week we announced the sale of sustainable aviation fuel for an international consultancy, Boston Consulting Group, and delivering those sustainable aviation fuel volumes to the airlines they use the most in the Nordic region. So these kind of models, and I guess many good models that the airlines have already in place, kind of all help to drive that sustainable aviation fuel use also beyond the mandates.
Yes, there's actually a question connecting to that right now. Volker, you're raising your hand. Yekaterina also. Volker, I just wanted to add...
Ladies first.
Ladies first. Okay. Yes, let's do that. Yekaterina, please.
Thanks a lot. That will be very quick. I just wanted to add to the cost point. Just before joining you, I was in a panel with Lufthansa, and where the representative of Lufthansa actually presented some numbers on the additional costs of SAF mandate. So they calculated that for 5% SAF mandate, which would be a mix of power to liquid and advanced biofuels, the price increase for ticket would be around 21 euro. So 21 euro, I think this is something within the normal price fluctuations we all experience when we fly. So this is not a big price increase, but then at the same time, such a mandate, such a quota really can help us bring the overall production cost of power chicks down. That was the only thing I wanted to add.
Thank you. That actually answered exactly the question I was going to read. So Volker, you raised your hand first and then Mike.
Yeah, I think this leads to another question or problem, because I think what we need is really to get a system, a regulation that we can just bring those investments we do to reduce our footprints and to reduce carbon emissions to the reporting and to make it accountable for our reportings. And that what Sami mentioned, that I think it was the Boston Consulting Group just buying fuels by themselves, delivering it to the aviation companies they are using. This is, I think, creating a lot of issues concerning the accountability. And we have to regulate this very clearly, because I think as a cargo industry, we have to just buy the aviation fuels by ourselves, and therefore we need a clear system that we can achieve somehow incentives. And I think incentivize the use of sustainable aviation fuel is really crucial. The United States just implemented a kind of system that's called the Blenders Tax Credit System, which gives the companies who use blended fuel the possibility to reduce their taxes, and giving the amount of money they reduce to the providers of the stuff. So in regulations like this, which gives us the possibility to spend on the one hand more for the fuel, but get incentives on the other hand, would be really important. And the danger at the moment, and I see this in Europe, is that we have a more like tax and compensation-based system that just takes the money from the companies via taxes and compensation, and just so lowers the amount of money we are able and willing to spend for innovation and new investments.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mike, you raised your hand.
Yeah, maybe one thought I want to inject into the debate, and that is that my impression is when we discuss about prices for sustainable aviation fuels or also other forms of alternative energy resources, is that we assume, or we take the today's price of energy as a reference case and see how we can get there. And I think we have to have an honest debate in the, let's say, 20-30 year perspective also, if that is really a realistic assumption, given also the fact that, I mean, we're all aware that current pricing of fossil fuels does not include a lot of costs that are a consequence of the usage of these fuels. So I think we also have to have an honest debate. What is the long-term target that we're aiming at with the technology such as sustainable aviation fuels or other new forms of energy resources, and also assuming that a lot of the let's say mobility and transportation and logistics that we see today and that are also projected over the next 20 years to grow are based on the assumption that there is let's say a cheap resource of energy. And I mean, we also have to, I think, look strategically more into new patterns of consumption and new patterns of international trade and division of labor, and how in a decarbonized economy these dynamics will change, and probably also we see a new larger patterns of trading and also mobility emerging.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you all for all these interesting points of view and messages. Our time is almost up, but I don't want to close without giving you the opportunity to do something special. Imagine you have this magic lamp, you rub it, there's the genie, and you could cast the wish upon decision makers. What would that wish be in one sentence, in a little tweet? Maybe Volker, would you like to go first?
to give us the regulation that gives us the and that incentivizes us to spend the money we need, and that they just taking away all the hurdles that we can just follow our strategies, which I see in most of the big global companies.
Great. Sami.
I think the biggest wish for the regulators is to act now, rather faster than later, and do it in a way that allows us both to use in the full potential the solutions we have today, and then, as said by Volker, at the same time investing in those future technologies that we will need in the future. So not delaying action there either.
Great. Yekaterina.
Well, my wish is that national governments include international emissions from aviation and shipping in their carbon budget.
Great. Lauren.
Invest in and incentivize SAF production today. SAF is a crucial and inevitable part of aviation going forward, especially if we want to continue to reap the social and economic benefits of aviation across the globe.
Okay. Mike.
I would recommend to really strike a smart balance between the sense of urgency and short-term opportunities, but also long-term strategies, and really imagine the world of 2040 and 50, because these will be long-term investments. And sustainable aviation fuels are just one small component of a very, very, very big and very complex transition that we're aiming for, given the Paris targets.
Perfect. Those are 5 great messages. So thank you for these insights. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you to all the audience, to sharing all this knowledge, to soaking up this knowledge, and let's do it. Let's make PTL in aviation happen. The sooner the better. Thank you all. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you for organizing. Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you for me. Thank you.